In 3.3, we're going to talk about equivalent equations and solving equations. So let's talk about the addition property of equality. So if I have an equation that says A equals B, then if I add C to one side, I must also add C to the other side to keep the equation in balance, to keep it equal. So that is the addition property of equality. The subtraction is the exact same. Okay, if I have the equation A equals B and I subtract a number on one side, I must also subtract that same number on the other side to keep the equation in balance. Okay, so this chapter is going to talk about the addition property and the subtraction property of equality, which basically just means if you do something on one side of the equation, you must also do the same thing on the other side of the equation. So using those rules, let's look at x minus 5 equals -1. I want to get that x alone. You always want to get your variables or your like terms on one side and your other like terms on the other side. Remember, like terms. Okay, so I want to get that x alone. And right now, I'm doing x minus 5. So how do I get rid of a minus 5? Well, I need it to zero out. So to zero out minus 5 or -5, I have to add 5. But if I add 5 to one side of the equation, remember the rule states I have to add 5 to the other side of the equation. Okay, so now what I'm going to get is x, and -5 and a +5 is nothing, so I don't even need to write that down. That just kind of cancels itself out. Equals, and then I have a -1 and a +5, so that's going to be 4. So x equals 4. Okay, step 1, identify your terms. Then remove anything and move it to the other side. Okay, so when I had x minus 5 equals -1, I need to get that x alone. And I know that this and this are like terms, so I need to get this on this side of the equation. Okay, I need to get it off of this side and onto the other side. So to do that, I have to get rid of it. I got rid of it by adding the 5 to both sides of the equation. Here's another example with fractions. So I need to get this 3 halves. I need to get this 3 halves onto the other side of the equation. I need to get rid of it here so that my z is alone. So right now I'm taking z plus 3.5. So to get rid of it, I'm going to subtract. I'm going to do the opposite and subtract 3.5. But if I subtract 3.5 on one, or 3 halves, not 3 halves, not 3.5, 3 halves. If I subtract 3 halves on one side of the equation, I have to subtract 3 halves on the other side of the equation. Okay, so this is basically going to be 0, so I can just X that out, and I get z equals, and now I have 1/2 plus a -3 halves, or 1/2 minus 3 halves, okay, which is really just going to give you 3 halves minus 1/2 is 2 halves, okay, but remember that this is the greater absolute value, so I got to keep that negative sign, and 2 halves is really just 1, so I get z equals -1. That's my answer. The second part of 3.3 is actually writing equations from a statement or a word problem. So here's a word problem. A company has a profit of $750 this week. This profit is $900 more than the profit P last week. Write an equation to solve the problem. Let's identify the parts of this word problem. The company has a profit of $750 this week. This profit is $900 more than the profit P last week. So this profit, which is $750, that's important, 900 more than the P of last week. I don't know last week's profit, so it's represented by this P. So I know that this week's profit was $750. This profit is, so is going to be the equal sign. Is 900 more means addition than last week's profit, which I don't know last week's profit, so I'm just going to put plus P. So your equation reads 750 equals, and you could have done profit plus your 900. Either way, this would be right. Okay, but this is how you would set up the equation. Now, it's not asking us to, but if we wanted to solve this, I would need to move this 900 to the other side to get my P alone. So I'm going to subtract 900 so that those cross out. But I know if I subtract 900 from this side, I must subtract 900 from this side. Okay, so my profit last week was, I'm going to have, let's see, that would be negative 150. Okay, so this week's profit is $750. This profit is 900 more than the profit of last week. So if I take 900 plus my negative 150 of last week, do I get this week's total? I do. I got this week's total. So I can plug my numbers back in to see if I get the correct answer. But yes, P equals negative 150.